Alas, I fear we cannot stay here longer, said Aragorn. He looked toward the mountains and held up his sword. Farewell, Gandalf, he cried. Did I not say to you, if you pass the doors of Moria, beware? Alas, that I spoke true. What hope have we without you? He turned to the company. We must do without hope, he said. At least we may yet be avenged. Let us gird ourselves and weep no more. Come, we have a long road and much to do.
Welcome to the Wayward Wizards podcast. Today we are reading Book 2, Chapter 6 of the Fellowship of the Ring, Lothlorien. I am Zach.
I'm Logan.
Man, coming off an emotional chapter last week.
Yeah, in this chapter, there's a lot of water ogling.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, dog, look at this water. Gimli's like, just a second.
You are not going to believe this lake, my dude.
Look, I know that there are orcs on our tail, but we gotta go look at this water, dog.
Bro, we can't miss a chance at seeing this.
And then Legolas is like, hey, get a load of this river. You're gonna love it.
Oh, baby.
I got a whole song about this river, baby. Listen up. Here it comes. Slow jam the river.
Oh,
it's so great.
Oh, the frothy foam of Nimrodel. The tinkling sounds of Nimrodel. Oh, I never thought about the fact that Nimrodel and the Mirror are like in the same. It is so weird that they are being pursued by orcs, and Aragorn is like, "Hey, we gotta get like many miles away from here before the end of the day, because we don't know if they're going to pursue us. You know, like they'll chase after someone who, if their chief is killed, you know, just for revenge, but they still don't know like if they're after them because of the ring or not."
Aragorn is so insistent that they get away from the orcs that he almost leaves Sam and Frodo behind. They're like, yo,
right.
The hobbits are like struggling. And he's like, oh shoot, I forgot you guys got hurt back there.
Dang. Sorry, Sam, you got slashed. Frodo, you got like freaking gored by a like spear.
Right. But they still have time to like stop and like look at Gimli's lake.
Gimli's lake gets a look, and then Legolas is like, here, let me sing you the longest song
you've ever heard.
Oh, that is so funny.
It's sort of a strange transitionary chapter. There's like callbacks to pre-Moria, like they say farewell to the mountains. Aragorn says, "Yonder is the Dimrill Stair," said Aragorn, pointing to the falls. "Down the deep cloven way that climbs beside the torrent we should have come, if fortune had been kinder." And then Gimli says, "Or Caradhras less cruel. There he stands smiling in the sun." And then he shakes his fist at the furthest of the snow-capped peaks and turns away. Yeah. I think it says a lot for a dwarf to like shake his fist and turn his back on the mountains.
Yeah.
And then they're like walking toward, so they're like leaving like dwarf realm.
Yeah.
And like walking toward the forest, right? This like enchanted forest, which is the elf realm.
Right.
And so Gimli is like, something changes, I think, maybe in Gimli. And
that's really interesting.
I wonder if like he's able to grow closer to Legolas after this, because I mean, this is just how I'm like psychologizing Gimli's character in a way that is maybe not in the text, but
sure.
But he can like see the effects of dwarven hubris or whatever, like that, you know, delving too greedily and too deep, and even, you know, this party of dwarves who tried to set up again in Moria, like what were they doing? You know, like what do they really think they could accomplish? And so, you know, for him to shake his fist at the mountains is it really stuck out at me. On this reading.
Yeah, that is interesting. And you and I and people who have read this book, forever have argued about what caused the snowstorm in the mountains. Like, was it just a snowstorm? Probably not.
Yeah.
Was it Sauron? That's kind of what Gandalf seems to imply, that it
Hmm.
was Sauron that caused the storm. Um, in the movies, it's overtly Sauron.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting interpretation.
So much so that Gandalf even screams like, "It's Saruman!" It's like,
Yeah.
okay, in case there's any doubt, you know.
Right.
Um, but yeah, there's definitely, like, in my mind, like, because the wolves met them right when they came down the mountain, I was kind of leaning towards that Sauron had something to do with the storm, because Gimli said, like, something along the lines of, this is paraphrase, like, his arm indeed has grown long if he can affect the weather from leagues and leagues away.
Yeah.
And Gandalf says his arm is indeed long. So, like, he's basically saying, like, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Sauron is causing this. And then the wolves come to them right after.
Right.
Here it seems to imply, like, Gimli seems to think that Caradhras, like, the kind of the spirit of the mountain, is what caused the calamity that prevented them from just crossing over.
Yeah.
The more I
Interesting.
think about it, though, I think it's probably just that Caradhras is just a difficult place, and it does not like men and elves and hobbits and dwarves climbing over it, and one wizard climbing over it. And so that's like it didn't have anything to do with the ring. It didn't have anything to do with the will of Sauron, but Gandalf having to light the fire.
Yeah. That's what causes the wolves. Well, the
The
wolves.
spies of Sauron
Right.
see, because they had just fled the flock of birds that
Right.
were kind of surveying the land. And so I think it's probably that they were seen by the birds. Sauron or his forces were alerted to their presence in the area. Then
Hmm.
Gandalf sets the fire on top of Caradhras and says, like, here's a beacon to say Gandalf was here for anybody who has eyes to see it.
Hmm.
And then they come down, and then the wolves are there immediately. So, and they're the wolves they're not just normal wolves, they're wargs, and they disappear when they kill them.
Yeah. Right.
So there's something Sauron-y about them. And he even calls them servants of Sauron. He calls them hounds of Sauron.
Yeah. I really like that interpretation because I think I mean, I like that it plays into, like, it kind of grounds the story, as we've talked about in the past. Like, there's a way in which the world they're contending with is enchanted, but it's not like,
Yeah.
like everything's not, it doesn't have a mystical explanation.
It's still our world.
But at the same time, like, there's a dwarven spirituality about that mountain,
Yeah.
and that spirituality is there and, like, expresses something true about the mountain
Yeah.
and about how difficult it is, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, to combine how difficult the mountain is with, Gandalf's magic, and then also Sauron's magic.
Yeah. It's like vigilance.
Yeah, and I think it, like, makes for, like, a really rich
Yeah.
reading of like the plot, and like how one thing kind of, like, plays into another.
Right.
And I think I think in the movie, like, to have, Saruman standing on top of Orthanc casting a spell is, like, pretty cool.
Yeah. It was pretty sick.
There's some things about the movies that, even though they work cinematically, are pretty goofy.
Yeah.
Like, if you
It's
think too
on the
much about
nose.
it.
I mean, there's not a lot of ambiguity and mystery, where I think Tolkien was totally
Yeah.
fine with, like, leaving things open to interpretation. Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of what's going on. But yeah, do you want to talk about the Mirror? Like, what exactly is going on with the Mirror?
Yeah.
So Gimli says, "That is Durin's stone. I cannot pass without turning aside for a moment to look at the wonder of the dale." "Be swift then," said Aragorn. "The sun sinks early. The orcs will not maybe come out till after dusk, but we must be far away before nightfall. The moon is almost spent, and it will be dark tonight." So Sam and Frodo go with Gimli, and Gimli pulls him aside and says, "This pillar marks the spot where Durin first looked in the Mirror. Let us look ourselves once ere we go." And that's when they look into the water, and so it's like a mirror. It's like a perfectly placid lake, and it reflects the mountains. It reflects the stars in the sky, even though it's daylight. but it does not reflect their own reflection in the mirror. Isn't that weird?
It's weird. Yeah, it's like a reflecting pool that has like a picture at the bottom of it or something. You know, it's I mean that isn't what it is, but like that's kind of how I imagine it. Like you look in and you're like,
It's like you look in and you see what Durin saw,
"Oh, that's
not
interesting."
not what's actually there.
Yeah. Like it's froze a moment in time or something like that somehow. It's also interesting. I mean, that idea that this is sort of like a special place or manifestation of who Durin is, because Gimli also bows before he leaves.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's like this sign of respect.
Yeah, it says he bowed and turned away and hastened back up the green sward to the road again. What did you see? Said Pippin to Sam, but Sam was too deep in thought to answer.
I mean, is this like the number one religious place for dwarves
I think
in the whole
so.
world?
I think
It's kind
so.
of weird. It's kind of weird that it's just like abandoned,
It's deeply strange.
and maybe it shows how limited the dwarves have become or something.
Yeah, how spread out.
Yeah, very spread out and like not united, and like this is like their main city,
Yeah,
which got screwed up by by the Balrog, right?
right, right.
And so they're just like MIA.
Yeah,
Be like if everybody just abandoned Jerusalem. Like, well, we don't care about that city anymore. We go there sometimes, but yeah.
that was my question. I guess like, what would the equivalent of this be for you and me? Like, if we were being pursued by orcs, we had just lost Gandalf, who is like very important. Like, so we're mourning and we're like fleeing for our lives, but like we have to pull aside. Like, we can't not stop and see. Like, what would be that important for us? Like, what would be an equivalent place?
It's a good question.
Maybe our childhood home. Like, if we were like in the area of our childhood home, we couldn't just like not swing by and look at it. A grave of a loved one, maybe.
Yeah, I gotta at least just go look at it real quick.
Yeah. Like, I can't
Great
not.
grave of a loved one is good. Um,
Maybe like you mentioned Jerusalem.
if I was less Protestant,
Yeah.
I would be like, well, you know, the like Holy Sepulchre or you know the whatever Chapel of the True Cross or all that Catholic
Yeah.
nonsense. Um,
Sorry, Tolkien.
sorry to my Catholic friends
The
and family
professor's like
members
rolling in
and
his
family
grave.
members. You'll have to forgive me. I'm sorry. Hopefully, luckily, grace exists. But I mean, those kind of even as a Protestant, I mean, I think like I'd be like, yeah, I want to go see Gethsemane. Let's go. You know.
Like, or like, yeah, we're the temple steps, like the Wailing
Yeah,
Wall. Like,
absolutely.
if we were like within a block of it,
Yeah, like it's just right there, Aragorn. Like, can I just go look? And he's already
like,
told me twice that we can't stop.
it's like, hey,
But
we have to rest anyway. Let me
he's
just
finally
pop
like, all
over.
right, go look at it. But it's got to be quick, you know.
But deeply weird. And kind of like, especially if you're reading this in 1954, you don't know any of this stuff. But
Yeah,
it's definitely got this like sense of depth and realism to it.
yeah,
Deeply strange. I don't think I realized until I read this book with you the first time last year. I don't think I caught the fact that when they looked in the mirror, they didn't see themselves reflected back,
yeah. It's really
and that it was
interesting.
like a nighttime scene instead of a daytime scene.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
deeply,
interesting.
deeply, deeply weird. One thing that happened right after this, I wanted to ask you about. Gimli says, "Here is the spring from which the silver lode rises. Do not drink of it; it is icy cold." And on this
Yeah.
reading, it has struck out to me. There are several times
Mm-hmm.
when they like warn each other that the stream is too cold to drink. Like, did they not like to drink cold water back then? Like, what exactly is going on with that? Have you
Yeah,
noticed that as well?
it's strange. Like it's too cold. I did notice it. It stuck out to me this time. I don't think it stuck out to me last time, but it stuck. I listened to this chapter, the Andy Serkis reading, and then I also read it with my eyeballs, and
Yeah.
it stuck out to me both times. I was like, too. It's like too cold. And I think you're right that there's other places where they're like, oh, don't drink that water. It's really cold.
Well, the one where I really noticed, I read ahead and now I just finished reading Return of the King. Um, when Sam and Frodo are walking in Mordor, and there's one point when Sam says something along the lines of like, "Here, let me like drink it first. Like it might be too cold to drink." And it's like, have you ever had water that was too cold to drink? Well, is it that like back then they wouldn't have refrigeration, so they wouldn't drink cold water very often?
It'd be kind of
It's
weird to drink cold water.
would it be like drinking water? Because we would say like don't drink it's too hot.
Yeah, maybe. I think I almost wonder if it isn't like an allusion to some other um mythological thing about, cold water being,
Or maybe like it was some like pre-medicine medical thing where they thought that drinking
yeah,
cold
like
water was like bad for you.
sapping your strength or something like that. Um
Anyway,
it's odd.
might be nothing, might be something, but I noticed like at least two times in this book they say not to drink water because it's too cold. Okay, yeah, maybe that will get cut out, maybe that'll be left in, but
Do not drink of it. It is icy cold.
deeply strange.
Soon it becomes a swift river, and it gathers water from many other mountain streams, said Aragorn. There's so much water talk in this. I mean, that's what I
So much
mean by
water
like
talk.
water ogling. Like the stream rises, and here it comes, and there it goes, and don't touch it with your feet because it's
It
magical.
it
Like,
twinkles and it drinkles and it
yeah,
foams and it yeah.
right.
Um, well, they come up to the woods of Lothlorien, and Legolas says, "That is the fairest of all the dwellings of my people. There are no trees like the trees of that land. For in autumn their leaves fall not, but turn to gold.
So
Not till
cool.
spring comes and the new green opens do they fall, and then the boughs are laden with yellow flowers, and the floor of the wood is golden, and golden is the roof, and its pillars are silver. For the bark of the trees is smooth and gray. So still our songs in Mirkwood say. My heart would be glad if I were beneath the eaves of that wood and it were springtime." That's such a
Has
like
has he ever
poetic.
seen it?
I don't think so.
I think he just has songs about it,
Yeah, yeah.
which is kind of. I mean, there's a little bit of talking here about how the Mirkwood elves and the Lothlorien elves, like,
Haven't seen each other in a long
they haven't
time.
seen each other in a long time,
Yeah.
and so it's interesting that all he really has is these songs about it, but he's just like yearns to be there.
It's got such a lyrical quality. For the bark of the trees is smooth and gray, so still our songs in Mirkwood say. I mean
Yeah.
it also it kind of has a similar ring to another line in this chapter which stuck out to me when when they finally tend to the wounds of Frodo and Sam,
Mm-hmm.
which actually that's a good transition. So they're they're halted and uh Sam and Frodo are like barely keeping up.
Yeah.
And Aragorn is like, "I'm so sorry, Frodo. So much has happened this day that we have such need of haste, and I have forgotten that you were hurt. And Sam, too, you should have spoken. We have done nothing to ease you as we ought, though all the orcs of Moria were after us." So they stop and they tend to the wounds of Frodo and Sam, and they use a little bit of the Athelos that they had left over from where they gathered it near Weathertop.
Yeah. Another magic
And
potion.
Aragorn's like, "Here, let me tend to your wound." And Frodo's like no, like he's like hesitant to have his clothing touch. He's like, no, like I, I'd rather not. He gets all bashful. Um, but they pull off his jacket and his tunic, and they all gasp and wonder. And he says the silver corselet shimmered before his eyes like the light upon a rippling sea. Carefully he took it off and held it up. The gems of it glittered like stars, and the sound of the shaken rings was like the tinkle of rain in a pool. He says, "Look, my friends, here's a pretty hobbit skin to wrap an elven princeling in." That's got like such a like a bup ba ba da ba da
Yeah.
ba da ba da ba da ba
It's
da.
great.
But isn't that pretty similar to "For the bark of the trees is smooth and gray, so still our songs," in Mark would say? It's got this like kind of
Same meter. Yeah.
like rhythmic quality to
Right.
it. So I wonder if like as they're like getting closer and closer to Lorien, it's like
How
bringing out
like
their
enchants
like
their speech.
yeah, like they're
I
they're
like that.
kind of they're almost like speaking in rhymes. And like once they get into Lorien, Sam like suddenly like is like
Hmm.
writing songs about Gandalf and stuff. So they're all like kind of like that might be reading too much into it, but I did notice
No.
that both Aragorn and Legolas they're changed by being here.
Yeah.
Well, so, I mean, so is Gimli, but they're all changed by being in Lorien. It's impossible not to be changed by being in this land. But even the way they speak is more lyrical. But I do think it's interesting that Aragorn said that the hobbit skin to wrap an elven princeling in
It's really funny. I think it's really
is,
funny.
well, he says it is worth more than even Gandalf said, that it's worth more than the entire value of the Shire.
Yeah, right.
He says, I have never seen or heard tell of one so fair. Is this the coat that Gandalf spoke of? Then he undervalued it. It was well given.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'll remember, I don't know if we mentioned this in the Moria chapter, that Gandalf said that Bilbo's corselet was worth more than the entire
Yeah.
value of the Shire.
There's a lot of, I mean, even for a chapter where not much happens,
Yeah.
the fact that Frodo is wearing this coat, which I actually think the implication here, even though it's kind of a funny throwaway line, is that it was made for a child.
Yeah.
Which is
Princeling.
sort of, I mean, that like gestures toward a world in which mithril is so abundant that you would make, you know, like, yeah, sure, like make one for the kid, right?
Yeah.
And it connects back to Bilbo, which I really love. I love that Mary says, I've often wondered what you and Bilbo were doing so close in his little room. Bless the old hobbit. I love him more than ever. I hope we get the chance to tell him about it. So there's always I just love that there's, you know, at least in Fellowship, little callbacks to Bilbo all the time. You know, you were talking about, you know, it is Lothlorien having some kind of effect on them. You know, they're suddenly speaking in rhyme, and you know, you talked about Sam kind of being enchanted by the wood as well. And you know, the only person who seems to kind of resist this is Boromir, to whom Aragorn says, say not unscathed, but perhaps unchanged.
Right.
And so Aragorn's been there, right, and has had this experience. And it does
That's where he met Arwen.
Yeah, it does seem to have some effect on people beyond kind of what you would expect, right?
Yeah.
And that I could see, you know, the closer you get to the center where the kind of city is, the more it kind of takes over and even like changes your perception of time. And
I was about to say, I mean, we'll find out after they leave that time flows differently there. And the seasons don't seem to obey, like the flora and fauna don't seem to obey the normal rules of the seasons.
Yeah,
Like
it's winter and there's like flowers everywhere, you know, on the ground, and they all,
it's bizarre.
you know, so
it's a literally enchanted place.
Yeah, it's almost like a Garden of Eden or something, you know, like hidden in this wood or something. Like, it's very spiritually powerful.
They are entering into the realm of Lorien now, and Legolas and Aragorn are thrilled. You know, the rest of the company not so much, especially Boromir. But I think it's interesting here. It says Legolas is like basically talking about Lorien. He says, "It is long since any of my own folk journeyed hither back to the land whence we wandered in ages long ago. But we hear that Lorien is not yet deserted, for there is a secret power here that holds evil out from the land." So that is Galadriel, but it's also Galadriel's ring. Like that is the power that is keeping Lorien kind of like as like this island of timeless beauty in the midst of this rising shadow. Especially, I mean, like Mirkwood is like right next door, and so at one point they're talking about the fact that they've seen the Tower of Goldodor like becoming occupied again. They see that darkness climbing, but the darkness doesn't see them.
Yeah,
like they're obscured, and I think that is the power of Galadriel's ring.
It actually made me really disdainful of the elves. You know, right next door there's this dark power rising.
Yeah.
And they like see it start to happen.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we're good. You know, we got our like fancy woods to live in.
Yeah.
And they're just not going to do anything about it. And I you know, and they're like, and like half of us are like leaving the world
Right.
to go live with God. And so
Yeah.
I guess we'll just let Sauron like have his way, you know?
Right.
And and I know that they fought, you know, I mean like whatever, there's like 10,000 years of wars against the dark, you know, power of Satan or whatever, but
Yeah.
so it's not like they haven't like put in their fair share, I suppose, but
Yeah.
I just sort of felt like some kind of, I don't know, Wilsonian American progressivism. Like, why don't you go do something about it?
Yeah. I mean, that's really worked out for us really well in the past, hasn't it,
Yeah,
Logan,
it always
as a
goes
country?
well. It always goes really well. So, but so I don't know. Maybe it's revealing something, you know, about myself that's
I could fix
overly,
it.
yeah, that's like overly hubristic or something. But it just bothered me a little, you know.
I do think it's really interesting that Boromir is like, hey, we already went through one like unknown ancient realm
Mm.
and it didn't work out well. Do we have to enter into this enchanted forest?
Well, and I mean, Boromir doesn't really trust anything that's not,
Manish.
well, or even just out of Gondor, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Anything outside of that, he's pretty skeptical of, um, and he can't even really interpret his own dream
Yeah.
correctly because of that. And he, you know, he didn't want to go through Moria, I think, for the same reason,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and or similar reason maybe.
Yeah.
And he's even maybe he's even a little more scared of the elves than he is of, you know, a dark pit. But
Yeah. I mean, the like the Rohirrim who we meet not too long from now, you know, they talk about Galadriel like she's this like
witch,
evil witch.
yeah,
Yeah, like in the wood.
Gimli has a
And
fit.
oh, that's what sets Gimli off.
Yeah,
But it yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think like Boromir probably has the same impression of the wood. He's like, "Hey, can we not go into the wood where the witch is like
yeah.
weaving her, spells?" But yeah, I do think this line that you mentioned earlier from Boromir is um worth reading. He says, "By strange paths has this company been led, and so far to evil fortune. Against my will, we passed under the shades of Moria at our loss." Boromir says, "Is there no other way?" And Aragorn says, "What other fairer way would you desire?" And he said, "A plain road, though it led through a hedge of swords." So that's just like Boromir in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
Like he'd
Old,
rather barrel through a
old truck nuts himself.
yeah, exactly. Just like the F-150, just
I think
barreling through.
I think it says a lot about, so Legolas has song, he's never been there, but he's got
No,
these songs about how wonderful it is, right?
right,
And Boromir's never been there, but he's certainly heard stories about how, you know, there's a witch there and people don't come out.
right.
He doesn't call her a witch, but you know.
Yeah,
Um the only person who's been there is Aragorn.
yeah,
And Aragorn's like, it's fine. But
yeah,
like even Boromir can't trust Aragorn's like hand account because of the like
yeah,
lore that he has in his head.
yeah,
And Legolas trusts Aragorn, I think because of Aragorn's reputation, but also because he's preconditioned to accept what Aragorn's going to say about it.
right.
And so I think there's an interesting juxtaposition there.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Boromir does not have a good time in Lothlorien.
Nope,
Um,
he gets undressed
yeah.
with,
And so he's right to be afraid, you know, in a way.
and Aragorn kind of gives him like a little subtle dig here. Boromir's like, nobody comes out of that place unscathed, and Aragorn says, "Say not unscathed, but if you say unchanged, then maybe you will speak the truth. But lore wanes in Gondor, Boromir, in the city of those who once were wise. If they now speak evil of Lothlorien," he says, "You can go back and scale the nameless mountains if you want, by on your own, but we're going this way." And Boromir's like, "Then lead on, but it's perilous." And Aragorn says, perilous indeed, fair and perilous, but only evil need fear it, or those who bring some evil with them. Follow me.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
he's kind of implying like, hey, like this does more about you than it does about the wood. The only evil in this place is the evil that comes in from the outside. So a little bit of foreshadowing there.
Interesting that something can be perilous and still be
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
Like just because something is good for you does not mean it isn't perilous to contend with.
Yeah.
Or a good place to be. You know, it's going to change you, and there's something about that that can be. Because I think we always think of perilous as something
Bad.
yeah, negative. But I think you can go through something perilous and be changed for the better.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this great bit in Two Towers where I think like Gimli calls something perilous. I can't remember exactly the context of this, but Gandalf says, well, I'm perilous.
Right.
And you're perilous, and Legolas is perilous, and Aragorn is perilous, but that doesn't mean we're bad. It just means that we're yeah. One person's perilous is another person's salvation, is another person's
Right.
strength.
How do you deploy that strength? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
that's what really is really the question.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, you want to talk about Nimberdale, the sexy, sexy stream?
Oh.
For a moment, Frodo stood near the brink and let the water flow over his tired feet. It was cold, but its touch was clean. As he went on, and it mounted to his knees, he felt the stain of travel, and all weariness was washed from his limbs.
Mounted to his knees.
Almost Frodo fancied that he could hear a voice singing mingled with the sound of the water. It's deeply sensual. Deeply.
You got to get a load of this water, man. You got to check out this water.
Oh, man.
When
Yeah, I'm like sweating reading this description of the stream here.
When it flows over your toes,
It mounts your knees.
There's nothing like it.
So I did a little bit of reading about Nimberdale.
Tell me about Nimberdale.
I mean, it is hilarious that they're like being pursued by orcs, and then it's like Legolas is like, hey, check out this song.
Want to hear a song?
It's like, hey, I got bars about Nimberdale. Yeah. So Nimberdale, she is an elven maid, and she falls in love with a lord, but she says that she won't marry him unless he can ensure that they can live in a place without shadows and darkness. And so he plans to take her over to Valinor by ship. And there was a time when the elves could go to Valinor by the bay that is near this area. But later on, you could only go from the Grey Havens near where the hobbits live. So he plans on taking her from this bay to Valinor. I'm probably butchering the story, but once again, this is like deep lore stuff that I've only just started to dip my toe into. But they plan on going, and Amroth is like in the ship in the bay waiting for her to come, but she gets lost in the mountains. And so he decides to wait for her, but a storm comes and his ship starts to get pushed out to sea. And so he jumps into the water and he dies. So it's this story about loss and longing for peace and safety. So it seems like her spirit is like kind of like in this river, like in some way,
sort of like searching for her love or whatever.
Exactly.
That's kind of part of it.
Exactly. But afterwards, Legolas says, "I cannot sing any more. That is but a part, for I have forgotten much. It is long and sad, for it tells how sorrow came upon Lorien when the dwarves awakened evil in the mountains." And Gimli gets a little hot in the britches. He says, "The dwarves did not make the evil." And Legolas says, "I said not so, yet evil came." Then many of the elves of Nimberdale's kindred left their dwellings and departed, and she was lost far in the south, in the passes of the White Mountains. And she came not to the ship where Amroth, her lover, waited for her. I never really thought of this until you pointed out that we have these like two kind of mythological stories of the dwarves and the elves, both with like an enchanted body of water.
Hmm.
So it does like it almost like acts like as a bridge. I mean, like we're about to enter into the time when Legolas and Gimli become friends.
Yeah. And here's the contention between the elves and the dwarves right
Yeah,
here.
goes
Like the
back like thousands of years.
I mean, the elves were, it seems like very like happy to accept like a mithril coat for their like little boy.
Yeah,
But, oh, geez, like, but you delve too gritty and too deep. It's like, well, you were fine with that until,
yeah,
you know, until things went sideways and then you abandoned us. And now,
yeah,
like, the most spiritual place in our world is like a ruin, right?
yeah,
And so,
yeah.
like, it's like we didn't mean to wake this evil.
Yeah, it's like even Gimli being like, oh, the dwarves didn't bring the evil, and Legolas is like, I didn't say that. You know, there's this tension
Yeah.
between the two peoples where both of them have experienced loss
But
at the
but it's
hands of the
this
other.
it's the same water. I mean, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
yeah,
it's the same water. It's and its enchantment has more to do with the stories about it than it does about like yeah. I mean, I know they look in the mirror and they can see the space. They can see space or whatever. But it's. I mean, I just think it has a lot more to do. Like Tolkien is not. Tolkien's trying to say something
yeah,
about the way these things are tied together.
yeah. Well,
Um,
I think that's a perfect. I think that's a perfect segue into their introduction to Haldir and kind of
yeah.
their once they enter into Lorien. So they need to find a way to like nightfall finally comes. They need to find a way to hide from the orcs that are surely pursuing them. And so Legolas and Aragorn are like, all right, we got to climb up in a tree. Um, Hobbits and dwarf are not like super thrilled about the idea of like being up in a tree. Um, but Legolas jumps up and there's an elf in the tree that he is like trying to climb up. He says Daro with a commanding tone. And Legolas is like, hey, stand still. Do not move or speak
Mhm.
because they are definitely in danger. Mary says, "Who are they and what do they say?" Sam says, "They're elves. Can't you hear their voices?" And Legolas says, "Yes, they are elves, and they say that you breathe so loud they could shoot you in the dark." Sam hastily puts his hand over his mouth and tries not to breathe.
That's so funny.
But they heard Legolas singing about Nimrodel, and I think that kind of like gives them some trust
Yeah.
um, of him and the rest of the company. They treat with Legolas. They bring him up, and he's like, "Hey, yeah, you can bring the hobbits up. Like we're not afraid of them." So Legolas, Frodo, and Sam go up into this like platform called a flet, or the elves call it a talon, and they come up to this basically this tree house in the top of the tree. Sounds pretty sick, honestly. And they treat with Legolas. And I wrote in my notes here, Haldir reminds me of C3PO. I don't know exactly why. There's something almost like C3PO like about Haldir where he's like, welcome. Like uh
He's
we
animatronic.
greetings. Yeah, it's like I am C3PO, human cyborg relations. It's got kind of this like we haven't spoken in this tongue in a long time.
Yeah, he's kind of not used to. He's not used to speaking Westeron or whatever.
It's been many years since we've spoken to people like you. Um
Yeah.
uh tell me like who you are and what you're doing and Legolas like kind of is like yeah we have 8 people, we got 2 men, me, and then these 3 hobbits, and they're like oh that's only 7, who else you got? And he's like I got a
Got a
a
dwarf
dwarf.
also. They're like, I don't think so. That doesn't
Wait,
sound good to us.
here's the question, did they not see the dwarf? Like they were all just there.
Yeah, I thought they could hear them all breathing too. And you think they could smell the dwarf or something?
Yeah, that's interesting, I only just noticed that. But
Maybe they're kind
he
of bait.
says
Maybe they're kind of baiting
it's like oh
Aragorn
yeah who
into.
I mean, it seems like they're like legitimately surprised that there's a dwarf among them. I wonder like how they didn't notice that. But it says a dwarf that is not well. We have not had dealings with the dwarf since the dark days. They are not permitted in our land. I cannot allow him to pass. So Legolas basically cuts a deal with Haldir where he's like, all right, we'll go through, but the dwarf will be blindfolded. But it's interesting because it's like, okay, it is against the law for this dwarf to be here, and they decide to essentially take a chance because they're like, we know Aragorn. We see that you are one of our kindred. We're not afraid of these little hobbit dudes. Um, we know that you're being pursued by orcs. So because we saw some orcs like entering the other way, like before you got here. So we're just like kind of break the law, and for the sake of, you know, doing what we seem to think is the right thing to do. This happens several times in the story. The other times that I can think of are in Rohan when they meet the Rohirrim. Um, Eomer is essentially like, we either have to kill you or take you prisoner. Like we can't just let you go because it's against the law because we're in wartime. And Aragorn basically talks him out of following the law. But Eomer is like, if I do this, I'm breaking the law. My life could be forfeit. So like, I really need you to come back and like present yourself to the king and bring the horses that we lent you back. And then, like my fate will be judged based on your ability to do that. And then the other time is with Faramir when he meets Sam and Frodo. He,
Yeah.
takes him and he's like, hey, like, I'm not supposed to like let you go. But I'm going to have to answer to my father for this. So like, like don't screw this up, please. Like, like I'm breaking the law for the sake of what seems right.
Yeah.
And I do think it's really interesting. It's like in all three of those situations, there's kind of this sense of like, okay, why was the law written? The law was written to protect us from the Dark Lord, and we're all enemies of the Dark Lord.
Yeah.
So why are you waylaying us? Like, let us pass.
Yeah. There's a sense that a judgment call can be made, if you're following the kind of spirit of what's trying to be accomplished.
Yeah.
Don't let the law uh, stand in your way. And I think in this case, they know who Frodo. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. They know who Frodo is, or Elrond has sent somebody.
I don't
Um,
think these guys do.
they don't
Like
know that.
these guys, I don't think they know. I think they know that Elrond has like sent word being like, some people are going to be coming through on a
I see.
quest, but they don't know the nature of the company yet. So this must have been like an early message had reached them. And then later, like when they have their blindfolds removed, they're like, oh, more messages have come from Elrond. So we know like the makeup of your company. So it seems like, at one point, Elrond during the Council of Elrond, which this is fresh in my mind because I'm editing that episode now, Elrond says, I'm going to send out messengers
Right.
to like warn our allies in the area. And he said like some of the message might get there before you, you might get there before some of the messengers. So it seems like that's exactly what happened.
I also wonder. I mean, how far does Galadriel's sort of like range,
Yeah. What's her beacon range like to the other ring of
extend?
power? Yeah. It's like,
And
hold on, I'm getting bad service. Let me see if I can hold it up.
yeah, and like what can she know?
Yeah. Yeah.
As they get closer to her. Oh, the other piece I thought was kind of interesting is they say that they haven't had anything to do with dwarves since the Dark Days.
Yeah.
So
We
we're
think
talking
that's like the fall of Casa Doom.
like 1,000 years ago or something like that.
Like,
Like
I think a
how?
couple thousand years.
So they haven't talked to a dwarf for that long.
I think so.
I mean, they're so insulated, and they're
Yeah.
insulated in a way that the Mirkwood elves are not. Um,
Yeah.
but they're a little Mirkwood elves are weirdos too, but they're a little more worldly than.
Yeah. They don't like dwarves either.
And Elrond, for all his power, is a guy who's like connected also.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if that kind of plays to his like half elvishness
Yeah.
or what,
He's like cool with dwarves.
but it's not like every elf is the same.
No.
There's a lot of
No.
variations like in the
Yeah.
culture. So
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk about their like little rope walk, which like I don't know. Usually, my my eyes kind of start glazing during this part of the chapter until like we get to the end. Like
yeah,
there's not
mine
really a whole lot that happens.
mine did. It's just like descriptions of
It's like, and then they walk, and then they keep walking, and then they keep walking some more, and then they get to Lothlorien. But like, I did think it was interesting. They get to like a chasm, Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, oh, maybe it's not a chasm. It looks like a chasm to Sam. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, it's running water that, um, that is just, just strong enough that you can't wade across it easily. Halder says, "There is one of my people yonder across the stream. Though you may not see him, he gave a call like a low whistle of a bird, and out of the thicket of young trees an elf stepped clad in gray. Halder skillfully cast over the stream a coil of gray rope, and he caught it and bound the end of it about a tree near the bank. He says, Celebrant is already a strong stream here, as you can see, and it runs both swift and deep and is very cold. Once again, very cold water is like not good. But we do not set foot in it so far north unless we must. But in these days of watchfulness, we do not make bridges. This is how we cross. Follow me." And so he like makes the string taut and then he just runs across it.
Yeah. Wild.
So he like rope walks across this like
Yeah.
loose rope. Super cool.
Yeah.
And Legolas is like, "Hey, I could do this."
Yeah. He was walking on top of the snow not long ago, right?
Yeah. But the other ones, especially Gimli, are not going to be able to do this. So like, do they have to swim over? And he goes, "Oh no, we can make a set of 3 ropes where
Right.
you have one in the middle and one on top, and you can kind of shuffle across."
Rope bridge.
Yeah, a little rope bridge. Super random, funny.
Yeah.
But I love it says, like the Pippin does it easily. He just like kind of puts one hand out and just kind of like goes
Yeah.
across.
Pippin's got that like confidence of a,
Young
teenager.
person. Yeah, who
Yeah.
doesn't know about mortality yet,
Yeah.
even
Right.
though Gandalf just died. Anyway.
Yeah. Right.
Um uh Sam just like barely gets across. And it says he breathed with relief when he was safely across. "Live and learn," as my gaffer used to say, though he was thinking of gardening, not of roosting like a bird, nor of trying to walk like a spider. Not even my Uncle Andy ever did a trick like that.
Yeah. Who's Uncle Andy?
All right. So I made a note of this to like look up later because Uncle Andy makes a return in the Two Towers.
Oh, okay.
When they have to use the elven rope to scale down the wall on the outskirts of Mordor,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Sam is talking about rope. He's like waxing poetic about rope. He says that rope is like part of the family business. He knows a thing or two about ropes, and that his uncle Andy is somehow related to rope making. So I looked up Sam's family tree. You know what Andy's name is?
What?
Andy Wise Rope Maker.
That's such a George Lucas name. I'm sorry.
Wait, it
Like,
may not have been Rope Maker. Let me think. No, it's Andy Wise Roper.
yeah, still. Like this is
So
the it's like this guy's name is like Laser Beam Thunder Force or something like that.
yeah, exactly. So it's Andy Wise, which I think is really funny because it's like Sam Wise and Andy Wise, his nephew.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, so it goes even deeper than this. So it's like the idea is that part of the reason why Sam is so impressed with rope and like so thinking about rope and talking about how good he is at tying knots is that his uncle Andy is like a rope guy. So he makes ropes. He's like the rope guy of the region. His
That's so
last name is
funny.
Roper.
Yeah.
So it's like part of Sam's history. Sam's last name, Gamgee,
Uh-huh.
Tolkien wrote in his letters that the source of the word Gamgee was part of a like inside joke with his family where they were on vacation and they saw an old man and he made up the name for him being Mr. Gamgee, right? And they kind of like created this character. It was like an inside joke between him and his kids about the character of Gamgee. But he had come up with that name because he remembered when he was a kid about a doctor who was like in the area that Tolkien grew up, who created a type of wound dressing for doctors called Gamgee wool, and it was made from cotton. So it was like a cotton fibered like wrapping that you would put around a wound,
Right. I have
like a
read that book.
like a band-aid.
I have
Basically.
read that before. Yeah. That's
So
really
he
interesting.
invented this thing. He called it Gamgee wool, but it was made out of cotton. So gamgee is like a type of cotton fiber. So
Mhm.
these fiber makers are used to make rope. So rope is like part of Sam's makeup because they're like related to spinning of fibers to make ropes.
Right.
Now, who does Sam end up marrying?
Rosie Cotton, his cousin, probably.
If you go back far enough, all
Maybe like
the
six
hobbits are.
generations, right? I mean, everybody's related to each other somehow.
But I just think it's so funny to be like, not even my uncle Andy. So like
Yeah,
Tolkien
like
has this whole backstory about like how the cotton and Gamgee like names are founded, and like what occupations people who were like involved in cotton fiber would be.
yeah.
And I thought it's
I
so
think
charming.
it's I think it's really charming and funny, and I also love that like there are people who have like a legendary uncle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like like the idea that Sam would be, Sam has respect for his father,
Yeah.
but Uncle Andy is a legend.
No, I mean, legend.
like like Sam knows that, it's his destiny to become a gardener
Yeah.
for the rest of his days. Although, he ends up being a little more important to the
Samwise the
Shire.
Brave. Yeah.
Yeah, but the idea that like I could make rope for a living, wouldn't that be
Yeah.
something? You know,
Yeah. Be like Uncle
like
Andy.
like Uncle Andy, and maybe Uncle Andy as a rope maker is, climbing things and using
Yeah.
rope in ways that you wouldn't expect in the Shire and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah. Making
it's
cool
that's sweet.
knots,
It's
teaching
really
young
sweet.
Sam how to cut a knot.
Yeah, it's really sweet background, and I love that, this cotton, compress or whatever, it also relates to him, marrying Rosie Cotton. That's pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway,
That's
yeah,
a cool
very much an
detail.
aside. So they cross this river, the Celebrant, and Haldir is like, "All right, thank you so much for coming along. Now we will blindfold the dwarf as was discussed." And
Yeah.
Gimli's like, "F you, I'm not putting on that blindfold. If you put on the blindfold, I'm gonna go back and go back to places where people know that I'm trusty and true."
Right.
And Haldir's like, "If you leave, you'll be shot to death before you even know what happens, because there are hidden sentinels in the woods." And Legolas is like, "This is ridiculous. Just put on the dang blindfold. Like, we are in enough trouble as it is. Can't you just put on the blindfold?" And Aragorn is like, "We'll all put on the blindfolds."
Well,
And
Legolas says, I mean, Gimli draws his axe.
yeah,
I think he's right to be offended. He really
yeah,
is. He's as much a part of the company as anybody. Certainly as much as Legolas. And Legolas is like a plague on the dwarves and their stiff necks. Like he can't.
yeah,
They're not really a company yet. Like they don't have. I don't know. They don't have, well, solidarity. Although Aragorn does. Aragorn's like, look, if I lead this company, you have to do as I bid. And it's hard. It's hard on the dwarf to be singled out.
yeah.
So we're all going to be blindfolded, even Legolas. And Gimli's all about it. He's like, yeah, okay. If Legolas is blindfolded, I'm for it.
It's like we will be a merry band of fools. I think he says like, as long as Legolas is blindfolded, I'll go blindfolded.
Yeah.
But Aragorn is like, no, like we'll all be blindfolded. Like you guys cut it out.
And now Legolas is pissed. I mean, it's really, this is such a, I mean, this is really, I mean, people talk about, I think, you know, sometimes the characters feel a little staid or something like that, but like not
Yeah,
here. Legolas is
no,
like also angry. I'm an
I am
elf
an
and a
elf and a
kinsman here.
kinsman here. Yeah,
And then
yeah,
Aragorn's like, now let us cry a plague on the stiff necks of elves. He's like, you're
yeah,
just as bad as as Gimli.
yeah.
Um,
I love this line here. This is almost like I think the thesis of the entire book here.
I know exactly what you're gonna say. Yeah,
Legolas says, "Alas for the folly of these days.
beautiful.
Here all are enemies of the one enemy, and yet I must walk blind, while the sun is merry in the woodland under the leaves of gold." "Folly it may seem," said Haldir, Indeed, in nothing is the power of the Dark Lord more clearly shown than in the estrangement that divides all those who still oppose him. Yet so little faith and trust do we now find in the world beyond Lothlorien, unless maybe in Rivendell, that we dare not by our own trust endanger our land. We live now upon an island amid many perils, and our hands are more often upon the bowstring than upon the harp. So I think that's like kind of like a running theme throughout the book is the way that evil persists because the free people don't trust each other.
Yeah,
They make enemies of one another instead of
I think it's a description of the human condition. And
yeah,
I think, how often does the world feel like that? You know,
yeah, yeah,
alas for the folly of these days. Why are we doing this? And why is it like this? And who decided?
yeah.
None of it makes sense and none of it is right.
We're
But
supposed to
it's
be on
all
the same team.
but it's all done for a reason. And the reasons seem good to the people who make the decision. But
Yeah,
ultimately it's like completely,
yeah,
it's like foolishness, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Folly.
And I think like Gandalf, calling people fools all the time, he has this like pure sight about what the goal is, and everything that deviates that is foolishness, and
Yeah,
foolishness and folly. I think you're totally right that this is one of the main points of the work.
yeah. It seems like a running theme is like the way that good people choose to fight themselves rather than the real enemy,
Right.
but also the way that victory doesn't come from the good people doing valiant or courageous things. It comes from evil undoing itself. And that the way that the good people win is by just persisting in doing the good,
Well, and
not in like bringing about the end in their own power.
right. Maybe that's a good response to my little fit about the elves not doing enough.
Yeah,
But them existing in this place and defending the beauty of Lothlorien and Galadriel's power in that place is
yeah,
what they is what their vocation is. If they spent more time in song,
yeah,
with harps and less time, you know, braining orcs with arrows,
yeah,
they would actually be better off in some way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
I love this line here. It says, "It seemed to him that he had stepped over a bridge in time into a corner of the elder days, and was now walking in a world that was no more. In Rivendell, there was memory of ancient things. In Lorien, the ancient things still lived on in the waking world."
At some point, it says that Frodo felt that he would still walk there,
Yeah,
like he would always be there. Some part of him would always be there.
yeah.
Um,
Even though he never comes back.
yeah, yeah.
After they go for a little while with all of them being blindfolded, Haldir says, "They bring me a message from the Lord and Lady of the Galadriel. You are all to walk free, even the dwarf Gimli. It seems that the lady knows who and what is each member of your company. New messages have come from Rivendell, perhaps."
That's what made me think that it's not messages from Rivendell. It's because she has some,
It's actually
you
just
know,
her like mind reading ability.
spiritual
Yeah.
insight. She's
The
like, I
closer
know who
they
all these people are, and
yeah.
probably most importantly, I know who Frodo is now. So
Yeah. I love this, this sense that they're all changing a little bit but just by being there. Uh just how wonderful it is, like, like it says that Frodo saw no color but those that he knew, gold and white and blue and green, but they were fresh and poignant, as if he had at that moment first perceived them and made for them names new and wonderful.
we get a description of the flowers.
Yeah,
Here ever bloom the winter flowers and the unfading grass, the yellow Eleanor and the pale Nifredil.
yeah.
Didn't Tolkien name one of his daughters Eleanor?
Samwise Gamgee names his daughter Eleanor.
Oh, Sam does. Yeah, interesting. I wonder if, is that where Sam gets the name?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah.
I like that everybody sort of just like throws themselves down on the grass.
Yeah,
But Frodo is totally lost in just wonder for the place. And then Haldir, is it Haldir who's like, all right, no, like start over here. Look this way first. And there's like a way to look at the landscape that is the best way to like. There's like an order to do it in.
Yeah.
Where is that? I found that so strange.
Yeah, it's like right in the second to last page. It says, as he stepped out at last upon the lofty platform, Haldir took his hand and turned him towards the south. Look this way first, he said. Frodo looked and saw, still at some distance, a hill of many mighty trees, or a city of green towers. Which it was, he could not tell. He longed suddenly to fly like a bird to the rest of the green city. Then he looked eastward and saw the land of Lorien running down, the pale gleam of Anduin, the great river. He lifted his eyes across the river, and all the light went out, and he was back again in the world he knew. Beyond the river, the land appeared flat and empty, formless and vague, until far away it rose again like a wall, dark and drear. The sun that lay on Lothlorien had no power to enlighten the shadows of that distant height. So I think that's Mirkwood. Yeah. So Haldir says that's the fastness of southern Mirkwood.
The trees strive against each other and their branches rot and wither. So there's like an order, like the trees are sort of like stewarded by the elves in Lothlorien.
Yeah.
So that they don't, like they all exist in harmony.
Yeah.
And they're like hardwood trees, right? They have these silver bark and golden leaves, and but in Mirkwood's a totally different kind of forest. It's fir trees and it's darker, and the undergrowth is not ordered by consciousness or something,
or even that there's a nefarious presence in Mirkwood.
Yeah.
Which we know now is Sauron. In The Hobbit, it's called the Necromancer.
Right.
It says, in the midst upon a stony height stands Dol Guldur, where long the hidden enemy had his dwelling. We fear now that it is inhabited again, and with power sevenfold. A black cloud lies over it of late. In this high place you may see the two powers that are opposed one to another, and ever they strive now in thought. But whereas the light perceives the very heart of the darkness, its own secret has not yet been discovered. Not yet.
Who inhabits it now?
I think the servants of Sauron.
But not Sauron himself.
Sauron himself at this point is in Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower.
So he had been there.
Yeah, for like ages and ages.
And then he moves. He moves because Gandalf and the White Council kind of face him down. Is that right?
Exactly. During The Hobbit.
Yeah.
It's like 70 years before this.
Yeah, interesting.
But once he gets back to Barad-dûr, he doesn't conceal who he is anymore.
Right. Gotcha.
Well, do you want to end by reading this like last little paragraph here?
Sure. So Aragorn says, "Here is the heart of elvendom on earth," he said, "and here my heart dwells ever, unless there be a light beyond the dark roads that we still must tread, you and I. Come with me." And taking Frodo's hand in his, he left the hill of Cairn Amroth and came there never again as living man. Well, as always, thank you for listening along with us and reading along with us. We hope that you'll join us next week for Book 2, Chapter 7, that being The Mirror of Galadriel. If you want to help us out, please share the podcast with a Lord of the Rings fan in your life. Of course, you can follow us, if you don't already, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the other places where you can find podcasts. Please leave a review, subscribe on YouTube, and of course, visit waywardwizards.com for more info.
But until next time, in nothing is the power of the Dark Lord more clearly shown than in the estrangement that divides all those who still oppose him. We'll see you next week.
Bye.